Guys, welcome to our January Global Citizenship Project by Megan McDaniel and Megan White. So we're just going to get right to it. So we did our January Global Citizenship Project on the government shutdown of 2018. This happened on January 19th, and our United States government shut down because the Senate could not agree on voting together about funding for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program. And to get a bill to pass, the Senate has to have 60 votes towards either side, and the votes was 50 to 49. So they could not agree, and the government shut down. And President Trump signed a bill to reopen the government on January 22nd, 2018.
So some of the standards we decided that we could include with the government shutdown that related to the 5 strands of social studies was a history standard that says use timelines to show sequencing of events. And later in our classroom ready examples of technology, you're going to see a timeline where we put together all of the government shutdowns from the past on one timeline that's interactive for the students to use in order to integrate that standard. We also did a geography and environmental literacy standard that says interpret the meaning of symbols and the location of physical and human features on a map. And we did this in order to connect the government shutdown to students' lives around them, because we wanted to include a map of the places near them that had shut down, which integrated this standard. We also used an economic and financial literacy standard to explain how money is used for saving, spending, borrowing, and giving, as well as summarizing the role of financial institutions relative to savings. And we decided we can integrate this by talking about how the military wasn't being paid and people from national parks weren't being paid, and that they weren't prepared for this. And if they hadn't saved their money and been financially stable, this may have been a problem.
So this is the civics and government standard that we chose. It says explain how governments establish order, provide security, and create laws to manage conflict. And we said that we could explain to our students that the government really wasn't doing this, that they were not able to manage conflict because it's conflict that caused the government shutdown at this time. For our culture standard, we said, it says exemplify respect and appropriate social skills needed for working with diverse groups. This is what we see with our 21st century collaboration, which you'll see later in our lesson. And then other subjects, we chose 2 ELA SL2, which says recount or describe key ideas or details from a text, read aloud, or information presented orally through other media. So you'll see later on in our presentation that we incorporated this subject through showing them an article that we found on Newsella, and then another news article.
Yeah. So this is the Newsella article that we decided the teachers could use to help the students learn about it. It's actually at a 3rd grade level, and since this is 2nd grade, the teacher would probably need to read this to them. But it talks about the Democrats, the Republicans, what they are, why this conflict happened, and it's just a kid-friendly way of showing them what the government shutdown was all about. We also decided to use a virtual tour of the Capitol because this is where the Senate meets to decide these things. And you can actually drag it around and hover over the paintings and see what they're about. And this is also compatible with Google Cardboard if a teacher wanted to use it that way.
Here are some classroom-ready examples of technology integration. So the students will collaborate with each other in order to recall the key ideas of the government shutdown. This is one of those really important 21st century skills of collaboration. The teacher will then give students the opportunity to share and fill in missing information and correct misconceptions. So this is that important formative assessment that we use to make sure that we're clearing up any misconceptions that our students may have. The teacher will then explain to the students that the government has actually shut down before, and will show the students a timeline of when the government closed and reopened in past years. So Megan and I created an interactive timeline of all the governmental shutdowns that happened throughout U.S. history. And if you click on the timeline, it'll show you who was the president during that government shutdown, how many government shutdowns happened under that president, the start and the end dates of the government shutdown, And then if you look over here, you can see the start date and the end date of our the one that just happened in January. So you can click the link and you can explain to your students all the government shutdowns that have happened. So this is something that has happened a lot throughout history that just happened. You can make that relative to them in that way. Okay. So then again, the teacher will explain to the students that this has happened before, and then the students will have the opportunity to read about each government shutdown on the interactive timeline.
So the students are going to explain, or we're going to explain to the students that the government shutdown affects our country's officials, the military, and their family, and people from national parks, because we want them to know that this is happening nearby and close to them, and not just in Washington, D.C. The teacher could show them a map of places that are very close to them that were affected by the government shutdown or maybe even closed. And the teacher could even bring in a speaker from the military or from a national park that either wasn't being paid or wasn't being able to go to work because of this government shutdown and how it affected them. We also thought to include the parents, that the teacher could assign a short journaling homework assignment where they ask their parents if their job was affected by the government shutdown, or even if this affected anywhere they wanted to visit or anything they wanted to do, or just their daily lives.
So this is how we connected it to the strands of social studies. So for civics and government, the classroom ready example relates to the civics and government strand because students learn about how the government works as well as what's happening in our government today. So that just really makes it relevant to their lives. For history, we said the classroom ready example relates to the history strand because we are creating a timeline of when the government has shut down in the past.
So the connections we made to the North Carolina teacher candidate standards were Standard 3A, which says teachers align their instruction with the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So after we found the current event, we went straight to the standards to make sure that our lesson didn't stray from the standards. And it was rather easy for us to connect this event to the standards because it was all about the government and how it works. We also connected it to Standard 3C, which says teachers recognize the interconnectedness of content areas and disciplines. We immediately thought of language arts and all the articles we could read or how we could have students talk to each other and collaborate. And then we connected it to Standard 3D, which says teachers make instruction relevant to students. We wanted to make sure when we were talking about the government shutdown that the students understood that this affected the area around them and the people around them, and that it wasn't just happening far away in Washington, D.C., but it was happening here to military families and to national battlegrounds, and could even affect their family.
So more teacher candidate standards that we aligned it with was Standard 4C. Teachers use a variety of instructional methods, and you can see throughout our lesson that we wanted students to be able to feel like they were in the Capitol building as they were watching the virtual tour, and they could see, the different paintings in each room, and even using a Google Cardboard was really helpful with that. And then we wanted our students to read about Congress and the government shutdown and how the Senate played a role in that. We also wanted them to be able to collaborate with each other to make sure that they understood through a variety of methods. And then Standard 4D, teachers integrate and utilize technology in their instruction. You could see that with our integration of the virtual tour of the Capitol building and the interactive timeline to help them see government shutdowns from the past.
So we wanted you guys to tell us what other ideas you thought you could connect the government shutdown to in social studies. So what are the different strands of social studies you think you could connect it to, or even other standards? You could even talk about what other grades that you think it could be connected to. What are your ideas on how the teacher could take this current event beyond the classroom walls other than just by explaining? So what are some ways you can make this real for the students and help them to understand how it impacts them and why it's important for them to know about it? And what other subjects could have been integrated into our lesson idea. We integrated language arts, but what other things could have been integrated, like math and science, or even other language arts standards?
So here are our sources, and that's our January Global Citizenship Project. Thanks, guys.